Everyone in the theater knows her. She's the woman who talks about the American Theater Wing at the Tony Awards. She's the woman who talks about the American Theater Wing on the Working in the Theater seminars on this station. But who is she really? Welcome to Women in Theater. I'm Linda Weiner, theater critic and arts columnist of Newsday. And our guest is Isabelle Stevenson, who for almost 4 decades has been a tireless guardian, advocate, and public face for quality theater in New York. First, before we go any further, before we start, would you please tell me what it's the wing of?
The wing is
The wing is a wing.
The wing is the American Theater Wing.
Yes.
And it's a year-round organization. It is a charity.
Yes.
But we do all we can to give theater to the community.
Yeah.
We bring actors to the schools. We bring the schools to the theater. And quality theater is what we're all about.
And why do we call it a wing?
Because that's the name of it. It's the American Theater Wing.
Wing of the...
And
yeah?
It's like in the First World War, it was the American Theater Wing, and theater was brought out to the troops in Europe.
So it was the wing of the... It was the American wing of the British something.
No, it was the American Theater Wing always, working with Great Britain for the troops in the fields. And then in the Second World War, it was the same. It was the American Theater Wing that brought theater out to the troops and also in canteens around the country as well.
So these were the stage door, the famous stage door canteen.
The famous stage door canteen was started by the American Theater Wing. Yeah. And there were canteens in New York and in Chicago and San Francisco and Los Angeles. And the interesting thing on the canteens, it was not for officers. It was only for enlisted men. No officers were allowed in, and no dating was allowed. We had hostesses from all the shows.
Oh, so it wasn't just hostesses, it was really hostesses.
It was hostesses in the true sense.
Yes.
And they wrote letters for the young men back to their parents or their family. And they served them food and they danced with them and then shook hands and said good night at the end of the evening. It was a wonderful, wonderful thing to have.
And when did you get involved with the wing? Now, I know that you became the president in 1966.
Right.
But you were on the board before that.
I was on the board as secretary before that. And Helen Menken was a wonderful actress, was president of the wing. And I stayed working with Helen, who incidentally had the most beautiful speaking voice. And we would have our board meetings. And just to listen to Helen talk, whatever she said, we said, oh, yes, yes, yes. Just keep on talking, Helen. It didn't matter what she advocated, so long as she talked. She was a wonderful teacher as well.
So she was the president, and before that, Helen Hayes was the president?
Yes, Helen Hayes before that.
And then before that was Antoinette Perry.
Antoinette Perry was the beginning, but Helen Menken.
Helen Menken, yes.
And also Louise Beck, Mrs. Martin Beck, was president at one time. They were all women of import, women involved in the theater, but also in the business end of the theater as well.
And so the wing began as a women's organization?
Yes.
It began with women playwrights and women producers?
Yes, but it was not known as a women's organization. There were men on the board, but at that time, and I think even up to now, there was no gender difference. It was a playwright, whether she's a woman or a man. Most of them were women.
Is that because during the war it was something that women could do as opposed to when men were in service?
I hadn't thought of that, but
because it really started in 1917 and then started again before World War II. So,
and they had the time to do it.
You were the young Rosie the Riveters of the theater.
Right, and I also think that women are more accustomed to giving and to doing things. And so that's why there are more women involved than men.
And you were the president from '66, and then since '98 you've been the chair.
I've been chairman of the board. And a man named Roy Sumleo was president and is stepping down this year as president. And
I think people do know, as I said in the introduction, people do know something about the wing, but we really don't know very much about you at all. And I did a little research, and it's such good stuff. So, okay, tell me about Earl Carroll.
I get very upset about it because you see the American Theatre Wing and say, oh yes, the Tony Awards.
Okay, let's go back to the Tonys for a moment, then we'll get to you, all right?
But it is not just the Tony Awards.
No.
We work year-round in the community. We work in the theater. We work bringing the theater to the schools. We bring school children to the theater. We have various programs on the theater. We have a program on careers, for example. Now that you're graduating, what are you going to do? And we bring us in a seminar, which is composed of a woman playwright, a woman director, a woman producer, summer stock, and how to write a resume. Mm-hmm. And that's for the young people that are going into the theater. They've graduated from high school, and they're now looking for a job. What do they need to know?
Well, the working in the theater seminars were your idea.
Yes.
You created them, and has it grown into something that surprises even you, or did you always know that?
No, I didn't. I never expected to be this important. And wherever I go, I find actors and producers saying, I learned so much from the Wing seminars, nothing I could ever learn in a school. And the people in the theater are so generous of both of their time and their talent. And in the seminars, you'll find that majority of them are women, too. And although we haven't started out to plan the seminar that way, but it just turns out that we have maybe one man and 5 women on the panel.
What I think is so great about the seminars is that they manage to be both inside the theater, something for the insiders and also for the outsiders. And that I know as a journalist, I know how hard that is. And, and I'll just, everybody who can't sleep in the middle of the night turns on television and they look at it and I think, oh my God, Judd Hirsch was very young.
Yes.
Yes. Because these things have a life that goes on forever.
And it doesn't matter when it was done, 20 years ago, it's still relevant today. The same problems are going on. The same discussion is going on about how much money it takes to produce a show. Where do you get the money? What do you do for it? And as far as acting, for example, where do you come from? Yeah. What's your background? Did you study acting? In the last seminar we did, it was very interesting. Alec Baldwin said that he wanted to be a sign man. I said, what do you mean, a sign man? He said, my mother used to put me in front of the television while she did her work, and all I saw was the signs going around. I thought that was television.
That was television?
So that's what I wanted to be. I wanted to be a sign man. And they're fun, but they're also very, very educational.
And you did the bookings from the beginning, right? You did the bookings. Now, how did you get so many good people to agree to do this?
It's interesting. When we first started, I had to beg them, a press agent or a producer. Now they call us and say, would you like to book so-and-so and so-and-so on the show? He's available or she's available. And it seems to be a privilege for them to be on the show, and I know it is for us as well.
Now, this confusion that people have, you can understand why people would have a confusion about what is the Theater Wing and what is the Tony Awards. That for years, right, the Theater Wing had gave its own awards, right? When they started in '47, and they were at the Waldorf.
It was Waldorf,
not televised.
And it was the Waldorf Astoria, and it was done in a ballroom.
Yes.
And it's very interesting. One of the very early ones, Anne Bancroft got an award for Two for the Seesaw. And it was in a ballroom, and there were tables all around, people were sitting. And Sir Laurence Olivier presented the award. And she ran up through all the tables and patted everybody. And then when she looked at him and he gave her the award, she said, oh, I wish you went with it. And of course broke everybody up.
You see, but it's not televised, so nobody knows that story. There's a dwindling number of people who know this story. Now, do you miss those days? Do you think, there's always so much controversy about having the televised Tony Awards. The last ones that we just had in June of 2003, for the people who in the middle of the night are going to watch this someday, that I thought it was one of the best in years. I don't know how you felt about it, but it was 3 hours, 3 hours, much more leisurely, smarter, funnier.
And it gave time for people to acknowledge it, to thank you from the heart, instead of that, thank you, thank my agent, thank my mother, thank my da-da-da-da-da. They were able to speak and give a little of their personal life to them. I thought it was much better that way.
Because it's heartbreaking the other way, and infuriating, really. It's a disservice to the theater. You know, what are you doing up there, just selling tickets for the road then?
Right, right.
But this must be, I know, has been an ongoing tension between the Wing and the League of American Theater Owners and Producers, because basically there's a difference in philosophy. Am I right?
Right.
Yeah.
We both believe in the theater.
Yes.
We're both happy that the award sells tickets for the theater, but the award is not just to sell tickets for the theater. And the League is a commercial organization. The argument is that they would like to use, and quote, use the award to merchandise the theater. And when you do that, you'll kill the goose that laid the golden egg, because it just becomes a commercial award and will have no meaning alongside of it. So the argument is that we want to keep it so-called pure and keep it only for rewarding excellence in the craft of theater. On the other hand, if it sells tickets, wonderful, but not to sell tickets alone.
Now,
and that's the argument.
I remember a few months ago I read that the League was actually investigating setting up its own separate awards.
True.
If I've read it, you've read it. Right?
Yes,
right.
You're right.
And that also the Wing is investigating, you know, how they can best have their awards. Can you conceive of a time when there might actually be two different sets of awards?
Yes.
Be two awards?
I think so. Incidentally, when the League decided they did not need the Wing and they would have their own award, there wasn't a taker in sight for it. They said, no, we're not interested. If you don't have the Tonys, we're not interested in an award show.
That's delicious. That's wonderful. Now, I see that the Wing owns the Tonys, which I don't know. I guess this is intellectual property rights, which sort of makes my head hurt. Now, what does it mean then you own the Tonys? Now, I know you own the name then, because it's from Antoinette Perry, who...
Right.
Okay. Is that what it means, just the name?
No, it means a quality. It means a quantity. It's the American Theater Wing's Tony Award. And Antoinette Perry, as you know, was an actress, a producer, and everything. And in order to honor her, they decided, instead of a chair or something, to create this award in excellence for the craft of theater. And it is a quantity. That's all I can say. It is the award. It's the American Theater Wing Tony Award. And for example, at the Tony Awards at the show, it had to be said 3 times in the first hour and 3 times in the second hour. It is the American Theater Wing's Tony Award going to.
Oh, they must hate that.
And you have to, believe it or not, fight for it.
Oh, I believe that. Sure, I believe that.
It's not the Tonys. Yeah. It's the American Theater Wing's Tony Award.
And you, of course, have been an advocate for the theater for almost your whole life. But before that, you were a dancer.
Yeah.
A chorine?
No.
No.
I was in something called Vaudeville.
Yes. With your
boys.
trio was called Nice, Florio,
and Lubo. And we worked in Vaudeville.
Yes.
And interesting, we did 3 and 4 shows a day across the country, and never complained, never thought there was any other way of being in the theater than 4 shows a day. And it was really wonderful. I learned a great deal about the importance of theater to a community. We came into a town in which the factories had been closed, and when we arrived at that time by train, and the mayor and the city councilor met us at the train and asked if we would give them our paper money, which we did, and they said, we'll get it back to you. At the end of it, we did what was called split weeks, which is 3 days and 4 days. At the end of it was on a Saturday in the split week. They had a little presentation on the stage, and they brought a basket and showed the circumference of the money. Went to the 5 and 10, bought postcards and stamps. The girl at the 5 and 10 then went to the shoemaker and had her shoes fixed. The shoemaker then went to his wife, and she was able to get a manicure in order to go to the theater. And it more than tripled the amount of money that came into the community through the theater.
Your own little economic impact study.
Tremendous.
Huh? Yeah.
And it has it today.
Yeah.
I get calls from people saying, what's on in the theater? And if I tell them something so good, they say, all right, then I'll come with Joe and get tickets, we do. And then she says, now tell me where is Bloomingdale's or where is Saks? But nobody ever says, I'm coming to go to Saks, I'm going to go to Bloomingdale's.
Sure.
When they come to the theater, they then go to Saks. So again, it's what the theater does for the community.
And did you grow up in New York? Were you watching theater as a child?
Practically, yes.
And you did, but you grew up in New York?
I did, yes.
And I hate to pry, but how did your family feel about you going off into vaudeville?
Didn't like it one bit.
No, I wouldn't think so.
Not at all. But they thought I would get tired of it, I'd be kicked out, and I would come back home.
Yeah.
But I didn't. And I was started in something in Earl Carroll's Vanities.
Yes. That was your Broadway debut, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And do you remember, what did you do there? Were you in the chorus?
We were the Rockettes, like the troupe of Rockettes,
Yeah.
only it was the Foster Girls. It was a pre-runner of the Rockettes. And it was just wonderful.
Well, wasn't that very naughty?
Yes. And so my mother came with me, knowing that within a week or two I'd be kicked out.
Yeah.
And so she'd be there to take me home. But I wasn't. And Earl Carroll was a wonderful man. And my mother wasn't at stage, she was Gypsy's mother.
You must have been very young.
Yes,
Yeah.
I was. Very.
Very, yes.
Yes, very.
And then when you were in your trio,
Yes,
this was just you and two men.
right.
And did they continue on in the theater?
Did they?
Nice and Florio, did they continue on in the theater?
Yes, they
Yes?
did. They did.
Yeah.
And,
Where'd you find these guys?
well, there was a booking agent.
Yeah.
And you went to them for vaudeville bookings, and I went, and they just said, I auditioned by myself, and they said, all right, we have two young men that'd be good for you. And they were wonderful young men. They taught me more about Broadway, not only about Broadway, but about working in the theater and how you are as a woman, or I was at that time a young girl, but how you handled yourself in the theater.
And you wore a gown, and they wore tails?
I wore a beautiful, beautiful gown, and they wore white tails. And we started out, and it was a beautiful dance, and then one tripped, and then tripped me, and I fell, and the other fell, and then we went back. It was knockabout comedy, really. And we went from the Orpheum Circuit to Los Angeles, and then back again on the RKO circuit as well.
And can you pinpoint the day that you knew that you were bit by this thing, by this bug?
Not really, like
Did your
Topsy. I just kind of grew into it.
You just looked at it and said,
I
that's
looked
for
at-
me?
and I just kept on going.
And did you have dance lessons, or you just were a natural?
I did have dance lessons. As a matter of fact, my mother sent me to an acrobatics school, dance studio called Michael's, because I was fat. And I went there to lose weight. And I went every
it in
Saturday.
Manhattan,
In
or-
Manhattan.
yeah.
And every Saturday. And at that time it was 50 cents a lesson. And that's what I did. Eleanor Powell was there as well.
Wow.
And we spent most of our time at the water coolers, I remember, and not taking lessons. But that's where I started.
And this trio really was very important to your life, right? I mean,
Yes.
you ended up going to Europe.
We went to Europe, we did a command performance, and we went to Paris.
Where you were called the blonde.
That's right,
the blonde Josephine Baker.
That's right, and I still have a faded Figaro clipping to show that.
And then she took you to dinner.
Yeah. It was
That must have been
wonderful,
amazing.
very exciting. And it was like a movie.
Yeah.
When I came into Maxine's, and I said, Josephine Baker, and the boys took me, they weren't invited, so they took me to the entrance, and they said, we'll wait for you outside. And so I went in, and when I said Josephine Baker, everybody stood up on the side. It was just like a movie. Saying, bravo, bravo. She was marvelous. Great personality.
Wow. And then you went on to Australia with your
London
with
and
your act,
then Australia.
and that's where you met your
That's
husband.
I met my husband in Australia. And he was English, and he was a journalist, and he was working his way around the world, and he was never going to get married. He was going to have any responsibilities, and we met.
And he broke up the act.
That was it.
Did he break up the act?
No, he didn't. No, he didn't. No, he followed me. My mother didn't think it was a good idea for us to get married, and so she said I had been going out with so many young men, and I was not serious about it all, and he was too nice a man. So they became very good friends and sort of banded together against me. And I left to go back to Los Angeles. I had a screen test waiting for me, and they took the test.
I heard you didn't think you did very well.
Did not do well at all.
What happened?
I didn't, first of all, I didn't know how to speak. Secondly, I looked a little bit like Greta Garbo. My cheekbones are Greta Garbo's, but not enough like her to be anything important. And so that fell through. And then the boys came over back from Australia, and we then began working our way back to New York on the circuit again. We went through every one of the large cities, Chicago, St. Louis, all the way through.
Sounds like Gypsy.
Yeah, it was a marvelous experience.
Does your heart go like that when you see Gypsy? Do you
Oh, yes, yes.
smile, baby?
Oh,
Right?
she was just wonderful.
Yeah.
I thought Baby Louise was
Yes.
marvelous. And of course, Bernadette too, but Baby Louise had a wonderful quality
Uh-huh.
to her.
And so when did you decide to give up performing and then become an advocate for the theater? It was a transition. Was it an abrupt transition? Was it hard for you?
No, no. When I got married, women did not continue working in the theater unless they were Helen Hayes or someone like that. And so I gave up the theater, and I had always designed my own clothes for the theater. And so I went to the Parsons School of Design at that time, took a course there. And also, I guess, in order to keep busy and not miss the theater too much, I then took a course in journalism at Columbia. And then my husband had a large company, publishing company.
Yeah. And direct mail?
Direct mail, and I became women's editor of it and did a book on decorating for the house and home, on sewing, on art. And that was when my children were growing up, and I would
Three
go to
daughters.
the, I had-
Three daughters?
I have three daughters.
Yeah.
And I would go to the office and be back home by 3 o'clock when they came back from school. And not until about maybe 10 or 12 years ago did I stop running at 3 o'clock. So I look at my watch, oh, 3 o'clock, I've got to go.
Yeah.
And because that was when they came home and I was home.
Looking back, I mean, you've had an amazing life and an amazing career, and you probably have seen Broadway and the theater change and evolve as much as anyone. If you could name like 3 things that you think are different now from the theater that you fell in love with.
Well, the most important one is the ticket prices. Not only I, but all of my friends' children and children's children went to the theater with their families or with a teacher from the school because they could afford it. Today, they can't afford to go, no matter how, even though with TDF prices, it's still too expensive for a family to go to the theater. And so I think that's the biggest change that's come about, and one of the most important and unfortunate ones as well, because you'll have no future audience, and you'll just have big events and chandeliers coming down and not theater going. And so I constantly ask for the producers to cut their prices on tickets. I get nowhere. They say, oh, here comes Isabelle again. I've asked for just $1 off for a top producer with a top show, like producers coming in. I asked for just $1 to be put aside for young people and their families, or a grandmother to take their child to the family. No way.
And there's just no interest. It's so
None at all.
It's
None at all.
So short-sighted.
Absolutely. We're
Yeah.
getting it now. Why not continue? You know, and it is short-sighted because there'll be no future for them.
Could you conceive of an award show that the wing would support that would include off-Broadway?
Well, we don't support it, but we have a grants and scholarship
I know
program.
you do.
And we give money to off-Broadway productions in order to encourage those people that are not on Broadway. And it's one of the most important of our programs.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that we give out the grants at Sardi's, a restaurant in New York, as you know. And from time to time I've said, look, we can send you the check. You don't have to come and take all that afternoon. Oh, no, we want to be there.
Wow.
And everyone talks about what they're doing, and they exchange ideas, and you have second and third generations of young people who had come 3 generations ago to get a grant and now have their own company in New York or off-Broadway. And it's a really wonderful event.
It must be so gratifying for you.
It's very rewarding, too.
I have to cut us off, I'm afraid, but thank you so much, Isabelle Stevenson. And thank you for being here. On behalf of the League of Professional Theater Women, I'm Linda Weiner, and this has been Women in Theater.